Okay, so Aaron, these are statewide leadership council members, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. And of course, you know me, I'm Maggie from the Texas Criminal Justice Coalition. And here comes Roderick. So I'm gonna let Jennifer introduce herself and then we can just go around that way.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Jennifer Toon, and I am a part of the Statewide Leadership Council. I'm a part of the steering committee, and we're really excited to have everybody here to talk about one of our priorities.
And my name is Alexa Garza. I am new to all this. I'm a former maid and just want to support our cause because it's been a while. So we just need to get some reform.
Yes. There's Roderick.
Oh, okay. So, hi everybody. Roderick McNeely here. I'm a member of the Statewide Leadership Council and Steering Committee also. And this bill that we're talking about tonight, the new wings, it affects me very, 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 very much. And I am just happy to be a part of trying to make something like this happen for all of us.
Okay. And I think Doug just joined. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and while we're waiting on him?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here tonight. Have like a lot of honor and admiration for the work that you're doing and the work of the Statewide Leadership Council. My name is Erin George. I'm the National Campaigns Manager for the Clean Slate Initiative. And you know, I come to this work from a background in doing state advocacy, state legislative work, and grassroots campaigns to end mass criminalization and mass incarceration. And on a personal level, come to this work. My brother is incarcerated and has been in and out of correctional facilities, correctional control for the last 15 years. So this work carries a very important personal aspect for me as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Aaron. I appreciate you donating your time. And okay, so we all know that even a minor record that's even decades old can affect everybody. I mean, can affect you for years, have a major impact on your life. Approximately 1 in 3 Americans are have some kind of criminal record. And so the Statewide Leadership Council has a vision, and that vision is called the New Wings. It's for people who have been convicted of felonies to be able to one day have our records expunged. One day. So this is our vision. It's called New Wings. And the Clean Slate Initiative is expanding expunction eligibility. And we believe that this is a stepping stone into building towards our vision and our dream. And so we are super excited that Aaron we found each other, and we're going to work together to get people's records cleared and expand eligibility. I keep getting tongue-tied on that. So we all want a system that automatically expunges eligible convictions, including felonies. Okay, I'm going to ask the questions to Aaron. So you already introduced yourself. So what is the Clean Slate Initiative?
So the Clean Slate Initiative, we're a national coalition that's dedicated to advancing policies to automatically clear criminal records in states across the country. Overall, our mission is to expand opportunities for all people with criminal records and restore access to economic and social opportunity to the millions of Americans who are impacted by a criminal record, and do that in a scalable and sustainable way. Something that is really important, I think, in this work generally is also beyond the what that we're doing, like beyond the actual what we're doing is how we do it. And so I think, importantly want to just sort of add that how we do that is by centering the leadership of directly impacted people and grassroots organizations in campaigns. We work collaboratively with state partners, state leaders like the Statewide Leadership Council, Texas Criminal Justice Coalition, Texas Fair Defense Fund, and Texas Appleseed, TPPF, who we've been working with in Texas, to pass and defend legislation that expands eligibility and removes barriers to record clearance, and then ensures that that record clearance is automatic for those eligible records. We work to support state groups in building an organized constituency for policy change, reorienting public opinion around not only the issues of criminal records, but issues of mass criminalization more generally. We're really dedicated to shifting worldview and really using work around clean slate laws to develop a permanent support base for justice reform, for reform beyond there are so many things that we need to do, right? And so for developing that base of support for justice reform for the long term. We also work to cultivate relationships within states, but then also between the states we're working in and across the whole Clean Slate network, so that we're increasing our institutional power to advance our goals in the short and long term. And we also do that by working to advance racial justice and equity by transforming systems that create barriers to employment, education, housing, and beyond. In terms of some background on Clean Slate work so far, Clean Slate laws, were first passed in Pennsylvania and Utah, and we've seen since then that they're increasingly being enacted or introduced across the country. Last December, New Jersey created a task force to study Clean Slate legislation and create a petition-based process for expungement, which is, a step in the right direction towards creating automatic expungement. In June, North Carolina, in a coalition led by directly impacted individuals, expanded eligibility for expungement and automated the expungement of a number of charges. In June, Louisiana passed 3 bills expanding eligibility for expungement and is preparing to move towards a clean slate bill. And in September, which is super exciting, Michigan passed a clean slate law that was the first state to include felonies in the automatic record clearance process. And we are partnering in active clean slate campaigns across the country. In states like Texas, New York, Connecticut, Delaware, and there are nascent efforts in a bunch of other states. So it's a really exciting moment in this movement.
Yay. I know that's very exciting. You're doing so much work all over this country. So how do you think leaders with lived experience play an effective role in a successful clean slate campaign?
I mean, I think across the board that the leadership of people with lived experience is essential to truly essential to any campaign that's aimed at ending mass incarceration and mass criminalization, because the reality is that lived experience is true expertise, right? Like that is expertise at the core. I think that being a part of policy development conversations is critical. I think about the ways that I've been able, being secondarily impacted by my brother's experience, have been able to look at bills and at laws and identify, like, I know that this is the intent of what you're trying to do, right? But like, this is how it'll actually play out. Mm-hmm. And so being a part of policy development conversations is so critical, because you're going to be able to see where a policy is not going to have the intended impact. you're going to be able to spot any possible like unintended consequences, right? I think about prior to coming to the Clean Slate initiative, I was doing a lot of work on bail reform, and a lot of bail reform proposals that are out there were considering eliminating money bail, but replacing it with mass electronic monitoring, right? And creating a system of mass community surveillance. And we know that community supervision results in control that extends beyond the person who's under surveillance, and also really sets up for that like cycle of incarceration. And so people who have the lived expertise are able to spot those unintended consequences in legislation, and that's really essential to making sure that we aren't like weakening one part of the system and just strengthening another part of it. And I also think that impacted leaders have the ability to understand how a given policy is going to impact their own lives and the lives of their loved ones in ways that no one else can. And so I think that that's critical. I think it's also critical that directly impacted leaders are a part of strategy development, a part of organizing, a part of public education and outreach and engagement with stakeholders and elected officials. Because, you know, an issue becomes real to people when there's a face and a name and a story behind it, right? Like hearing about the real life impacts, the human experience of the damage caused by a criminal record is what changes hearts and minds. And your truth represents the truth of millions of people in the United States, right? And when people, whoever it is, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's at a town hall, whether it's an elected, whether it's a prosecutor, your truth is hard to ignore. And your truth is also the truth of millions, right? You know, like 1 in 3 people in the US have some type of criminal record, and 1 in 2 people in the US have an immediate family member who either is incarcerated or has been incarcerated. And that data shows a truth that we know, like there's so many of us that are impacted. And there are many of us who don't feel empowered, right, to lead and be a part of a movement or even know that a movement is there. And we're primed to be a part of this movement and to fight for change. And so I think that almost to like flip the question, the only effective campaigns are campaigns where leaders with lived experience play a central role.
I love that so much, because we encounter so many people who don't believe that their experience can do anything. And I've learned so much in the past couple of years of how much it really helps. So how do you think the Statewide Leadership Council could be most effective in this campaign?
I mean, I think there are so many ways, and I think that brainstorming and being again a part of all of the process, right? I think that there's value in providing testimony and providing stories, but also your expertise and brilliance being a part of the strategy and the policy and the planning is so critical. And, you know, I think groups and organizations led by and made up of people directly impacted by mass incarceration, like play a leadership role in so many of our Clean Slate campaigns. You know, as I mentioned earlier, in North Carolina, the Second Chance Alliance is an organization that is led by and made up of directly impacted leaders. They lead the coalition and, you know, in partnership with their coalition partners have organized mass lobby days, town hall meetings, press and communication strategies, and like way beyond that. And that ultimately resulted in passage of the Second Chance Act, which was a law that expanded eligibility for expunging nonviolent criminal convictions and then automated expungement of dismissed or not guilty charges. But that's just the first step in their Clean Slate agenda, right? Like they're going back for more. And so their leadership really is what drove that through. In Michigan, something that I feel is so powerful, you know, there was a version of the bill, not what passed, right? A version of the bill that was introduced and impacted people and communities felt that it didn't go far enough, right? And so they organized listening sessions across the state in key districts And they collected public opinion data from those listening sessions where they shared their stories and then asked questions about like, would you support, violent felony charges being eligible for automatic relief and automatic expungement after this amount of time, right? And here's what the data shows, et cetera. And so they collected that public opinion data which supported a stronger bill than what was currently on the table. And that ultimately resulted in the inclusion of felony charges in the final Clean Slate bill. And so I feel like that's such a beautiful and like powerful example of how the leadership of directly impacted people engaging with community actually like substantively changed the bill in ways that will have impact on hundreds of thousands of people. I also think, what you're doing right now is so powerful, and the planning that you're doing. I tell Doug and Maggie this, like I talk about it all the time when I'm talking to folks in other states about, ways that we need to be organizing and building the power of directly impacted people across the state. And I use the Statewide Leadership Council as an example, organizing and building power in key districts across the state and moving the public as well as judges, prosecutors, law enforcement on like a person by person basis to support your reform agenda is critical to the passage of Clean Slate and New Wings legislation, but like is also critical to future reform, right? Like that work that we do on one bill or two bills or three bills, like that creates our base for future reform. And so I think those are just some ways to be most effective. I think being in continued community with each other, with our other partners on this campaign, and really thinking creatively about how we shift narrative is a really powerful way to be effective in this campaign.
I was listening what you said about the listening sessions across. So if Statewide Leadership Council were to like have in every district that we have a member, like a little town hall, and just talk to them, like, look, this is what would be positive, and how would you feel about that? Would that be a listening session?
Yeah, I mean, listening sessions, town halls, right? Like it's, I think agendas and, the sort of like run of show of an event can look a whole lot of different ways. And, Clean Slate and, all of the partners on the campaign are like certainly here to support, right? Like we're all in this together. But I think that, yeah, town halls town halls have played a key role in every organization or every campaign I've worked on. And prior to coming to Clean Slate, I've primarily worked at organizations that were grassroots organizations building the power of directly impacted people to lead the change that we're fighting for. And town halls have, an immense impact, right? Because you're not only trying to get people to support your issue in the moment, right? And to support a bill in a moment, but to understand the system more broadly. And, it's only half of the fight, if that, to pass the bill, right? Like we've got to defend it. We've got to make sure we can implement it. And I will certainly say from personal experience, like, on pretrial in New York, I wish we'd continue to do those town halls, on a regular basis, because inevitably what happens when you pass and you move transformative change that really challenges the narrative that the system has put forth, you get pushback, right? Like, and they come for you. And so it's like building the base of people who understand these issues, right? Like the system is designed to be complicated for a reason, right? And so the expertise that you provide in a town hall, right? And in explaining how the system actually works and what the impacts actually are, get people bought into like fighting for the reform and defending it even after it's passed and fighting for the next thing.
Yes, I love that. So what do you think are some challenges and obstacles that we may encounter along the way?
I mean, campaigns are hard work. It's also beautiful work, and it's like work that builds community and is like always fulfilling. I think, when I was thinking about this question, I think the greatest obstacle that I've encountered and that I foresee, us fighting back against as we fight for new wings and as we fight for Clean Slate is that the broad we, like societally, we've been fed a narrative that the criminal justice system keeps us safe.
Mhm.
We've been fed a narrative that it's actually a system that delivers justice. And so I think the biggest challenge in this work of ending mass criminalization, perpetual punishment is re-educating people, reorienting people, and creating an understanding that this system doesn't in fact deliver public safety, right? Because people having stable lives and opportunities and access to community and access to supportive services, like those are the things that actually create safe and healthy communities. And so it's really, I think our work at the deepest level is about creating a paradigm shift, right? And a shift in understanding of like who the valid and credible messengers on public safety are, right? And it's us, right? We know the things that make our lives safe. I know the things that would serve my brother better than prison, better than parole, better than jail. I know and so I think that paradigm shift is really important. And so I think really the greatest obstacle in this work is getting people to understand what truly creates fairness, justice, and equity, and like dispensing with the idea that stamping someone with a criminal record for life delivers any sort of safety. And so while it's the biggest obstacle, I think it's also the most important part of this work.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate your time. Do we have any questions, Jennifer or Alexa?
I don't see any.
Do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions? I'm always full of questions. So I really like what you said about, lived experience. And I think that, goes with anything, whether it's mental health or criminal justice or anything like that. The person with the lived experience may not have the academic qualifications to be in the room, but they are the person with the most valuable knowledge, right? Because, something can be well-intended and we're like, wait a minute, that's not going to work like that. And if you transition all those people on, for instance, electronic monitoring, let me tell you how miserable and hard my life was trying to complete super intensive supervision for a year. I can't imagine people doing it without support. And they don't think about that, right? Because they're thinking, well, this sounds like a good idea. Without that lived experience narrative, it just, it lacks something. It lacks efficiency. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. So, and I think that you're right. Like the difficulties in this is that thing that we've all been taught, that the criminal justice system keeps us safe. And if you talk to community members without that lived experience, without being able to tell them about that lived experience, to just propose, hey, we would like to loosen the requirements concerning jobs or housing and allow people with felonies not to be hindered, people immediately get defensive because that person with the violent felony or the felony is an other in their mind. It's a number, it's a person. But then when you start talking about your experience, they're like, oh, I get it. Like, that's horrible that you went through that. It's like, yeah, like whatever society and media has painted people that have, been in the criminal justice system, it's a caricature and it's not real. And like you said, if you want safe communities, then we have to be involved in our communities. And it's really difficult to do that when your community doesn't want you to have a place to live or a job. But then they penalize you when you seek alternatives to that, because you have to live and you have to survive. So this is why this legislation is so important to each one of us who are watching this and who are on this call, because we've all experienced it. It's very difficult to find a place to live, and I think, you know, in a lot of ways, housing comes first, like before the job and before the other things that keep us stable. Without housing, you know, the other things can't work. And when you have a felony conviction, it's very difficult, and people don't realize that. They really don't. They have this understanding that if you do right, if you do well, if you do what you're supposed to do, well, then sure enough, you get you a job and a home. And it was like, well, I was busting my tail with 2 minimum wage jobs and living at my parents because I'm doing what you're telling me I'm supposed to do, but I keep running into these barriers over something that happened 25 years ago. And you're not allowing me that space to show that I'm a valuable part of this community. And it does something to our morale, and you know, it just perpetuates that cycle. So it doesn't really sound like I had a question. I just wanted to I just wanted to talk about, you know, how important this legislation is, and we really appreciate you supporting us and being in this space with us.
I mean, I appreciate being in the space, and I think, you know, I agree. I was talking to a good friend and like colleague of mine who is formerly incarcerated the other day, and just thinking about how it's almost like extrajudicial sentencing, right? Like it's like sentencing to housing instability, sentencing to financial instability, you know, sentencing, you know, an extrajudicial sentencing to not being able to like actualize your life's dreams, right? And if we are under this impression that we have created a system focused on rehabilitation, focused on second chances, there are a lot of changes that need to happen to make that real, right? And I think that that's one of the really powerful things that I've seen in the 6 months 7 months I've been working at the Clean Slate initiative, is that like that value for second chances, that value for like fairness and equity is actually something that like resonates really broadly. You know, I think that, and it's why we've seen support for Clean Slate policies. Like, and I'm just gonna be like totally transparent. I've worked on a number of issues, most recently like bail, discovery, and speedy trial, and like it is not as broadly supported, right? But people, you know, we were talking about the numbers before, right? When there are so many people in the United States who are firsthand impacted, and then half of all adults in the United States are secondarily impacted, like, you know, we want to have second chances, and we want our loved ones to have second chances. And so there is a really immense amount of support across political parties, across, you know, business and labor, across and like multi-issue, right? Like this is an issue of this is a criminal justice issue, but it's also like an education justice issue. A parent deserves to participate in their child's education, right? And a person deserves to participate in their own education. This is an employment justice issue. And particularly in the face of COVID, this is an issue that is central to an inclusive economic recovery, right? We can have an economic recovery that deepens racial disparities and socioeconomic disparities, or we can have one that tries to even the field, right? By eliminating criminalization based on a record.
I have a question. You talked about one state that passed the Clean Slate bill, and they even added the felons to that. And I know the best tool to use, well, the best tools is from people who have actually been involved in the criminal justice system coming out, that have made the transition to being successful and are still being ostracized behind their records. I would like to know the strategies. What else that was used other than just my lived experience when I go to talk to the representatives? Were there support letters presented? What was the strategy that was used to help persuade? Because we know there are going to be a lot of naysayers, and if you haven't been impacted by incarceration, then you don't even understand what I'm going through. And so I would like to know, what else could I do besides give you my lived experience and my past record of when I got out to help win you over as a naysayer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, there's so many, and I'm so excited for the point that we're at in this campaign, because I love a campaign at the early stages. Like, it's like everything, like, I feel like my body crackles. Like, I'm so excited. I'm like, there's so many strategies and tactics to use. I think that those listening sessions, right, were really critical, talking to people and giving them information, right, about like you said, outside of stories, like giving the data. There's research that shows that and I'm maybe gonna misquote the exact stat, but for misdemeanors and non-violent felony convictions, I want to say it's 3 to 5 years if someone is not, and when we say crime free, we don't mean rearrest, right? Because recidivism, if we're talking about arrest, is just as much a function of police behavior as it is someone's behavior. So when we say crime free, it's conviction. For 3 to 5 years, they are no more likely than anyone else to be reconvicted. And for violent felony charges, I think maybe it's 4 to 6. And then after 10 years, I believe that what the research shows is that people with past histories are less likely than the average person to be convicted of a crime, right? And so I think that data helps, and we need more data, right? As we know, data and tracking in these systems is complicated. And, when we're talking about the behemoth we're talking about, it's challenging, but I think that data helps. I think that, if we're talking about legislators, I think that organizing call-in days is really critical, really important. Doing meetings with legislators. I think that, sign-on letters from, a variety of stakeholders also are helpful and shift opinion. I think op-eds, I think letters to the editor, right? If you see an article in, your local or statewide or national news that is tangentially related to a criminal record, right? Tangentially related, letter to the editor, and we can pull together templates collectively, right? So that it's easy for folks to do. But just responding to that, right, in a letter to the editor, which is usually, 75 words or whatnot, very brief, to just put in the public narrative regularly what we're doing and why. I think that really creates shifts and change. I think I'm a big fan of direct action, and obviously there's limitations and sort of new versions of that in a COVID world. But I think that people coming together and doing press conferences and doing rallies and doing banner drops and on campaigns have done billboards in key places, in the Capitol in Albany, put up billboards where when legislators drove in to go to session, they were going to see the billboard, right? You can, actually pretty affordable to do bus stop, ads on bus stops. And then I think just really also something that there's really no equivalent for person by person outreach, because at the end of the day, in my experience, you pass a bill by creating the external crisis, right? You need the groundswell of support that shows legislators that either like they have the support and they're not gonna get voted out of office, or like that they'll get voted out of office if they don't do this, right? And so I think that there's like, it's really like, there's no substitute for like door knocking, really, right? And being like, hey, here's this issue, like, want to talk to you about it, like, here's some information about it, can you take this one action, right? Like, do you feel like you support this? Come to a meeting. Can you call your legislator? Like, here's a script for you, what you can do. Here's a call-in day that we're organizing. And I think that, you know, there's just, I feel like those are just like the off the top of my head ones, but I think there's a lot of ways, right? You can, and I feel like art plays such an incredible and important role, right? Like identifying if there are like pop-up exhibits or like art installations that get people to see something and be like, huh, what's that? And then come read about it. And then like you draw them to action. I don't know if that was a sufficient answer to the question.
I have one more question. You talked about some information that if a person for misdemeanors was out from 3 to 5 years, they were less likely to commit another crime, and from 4 to 6 years for violent offenders. Is there a database for that? And if so, what is it? Because I would like to acquire that information myself.
I can pull up the research right now.
That's very, very vital. And is that by state, where the bills have already been passed, or is that state by state period?
It is, it's general like empirical research that went out, that was published, and I can get the full link. I have the citation
Okay.
right now available. That's the citation, but I can find the link to the article for you.
Okay.
And we have one more question for Aaron. In your experience with Clean Slate, would you speak a little on the perceptions from early days to now? How have public perceptions on a vision of stability for the formerly incarcerated changed from then until now? If you could share your perspective on the initiative's growth over the years.
Well, I will do my best because I'm relatively new to Clean Slate National overall. So I came on board about 6 months ago, though I've been familiar with the work for quite a while. I mean, I think, you know, so I'm based in New York, which is obviously, you know, close to Pennsylvania, and you hear a lot about what's happening in your neighboring states. And so I remember hearing about Pennsylvania's law when it was moving when I was in New York. And I really feel like there was an explosion in interest from there, right? And there were a lot of efforts that sort of bubbled up from then. And I was not working for a Clean Slate initiative then, but I think over the course, that was probably, I think the bill began to move in 2017, passed in 18, and went into effect in 19. And, you know, since then, the interest from individuals, from government actors, from other stakeholders has really bubbled up and blossomed, which is why the Clean Slate initiative nationally has expanded, right? We this is the first year that we've had a centralized staff. We have an amazing steering committee of organizations who have expertise in various areas and who support state campaigns. And it was definitely, you know, they were like, we need central staff who are like just working on this full time. And so I think interest has definitely exploded. I think I've been like, you know, it's been really impressive and really like eye-opening for me in coming on 6 months ago and having, you know, a number of states where there were campaigns that we were implementing bills, and then a number of states that had active legislation. And then states like Texas and Oregon and Delaware, where there was a groundswell of support, right? But a campaign hadn't launched yet, right? There'd been work done over the course of years to lay the table for legislation and prior legislation passed, and just really like haven't walked into a state where people aren't working on this in one way or another and aren't interested. And I think that that's really, really powerful. You know, we have like really powerful business partners who are there to support the leadership of state advocates and directly impacted people. You know, I think that it's been impressive to me as far as this issue goes to see the real breadth and depth of support. And it's, you know, it's only increasing, right? Beyond the states that we have like campaigns in, there are folks reaching out all the time, interested in learning more about Clean Slate, because I think, you know, it's sort of like when like a dirty secret comes to light where you're like, well, we know we have like record clearance laws on the books. And then people realize like those record clearance laws, you know, maybe are not nearly as expansive as they need to be in terms of eligibility, or those record clearance laws have so many barriers that it's impossible to access, right? You have to pay a fee that's exorbitant. The statute's so difficult to navigate that like no one that can't afford to pay an attorney is able to even see if they're eligible. And then there's the, you know, the time frame between the filing, right? And that people are just like, wow, like realizing that that what they thought was a possibility in the system in action and practice really isn't.
Yes, it's so confusing too. We have another question from Cynthia. Where are the areas where you see pushback? What's a good strategy to overcome the barriers of the Clean Slate bill?
I mean, so, you know, in terms of pushback, I think that piece about narrative, right, is and shifting narrative and consciousness, right, is an area of pushback. I think, you know, I think that we're also talking about like creating a new system and infrastructure, right? Moving away from a petition-based process towards a process where expungements happen automatically, right? Based on whatever the criteria in the final law is. And so I think pushback happens around, generally happens around questions of like, how are we going to do this? What's going to happen if we make this automatic? But those, you know, we found like generally there's actually a lot with like early engagement with agencies and really like getting the information from agencies about like how data flows between you know, the court repository and the law enforcement repository. Oftentimes those questions that could be opposition are able to be answered, right? And you know, I think another place is, you know, what you're doing when you create an automatic system is you're removing the ability for objections, right? You're removing that petition-based process, that manual process. And so I think that becomes an area of pushback sometimes. And I think, you know, really the best way to address any obstacle is to build the base of support that doesn't see it as an obstacle, you know, I think that like power mapping is super important, right? Like who are the people who can deliver what you want and what you're fighting for, right? Like the governor ultimately can sign or veto the bill. You know, you need legislators in key positions, key committee seats, right, to move that bill forward. You need maybe there's like a key prosecutor or sheriff or key member of the judiciary who has significant influence over key members of the legislature, and then identifying like who are the people that move them and how, and organizing in that way is really the best way to move past that opposition and move through it. And you know, I think that's sort of the short answer. I think there are ways like, you know, you can go over the mountain, you can go around the mountain, or you can go through the mountain. And like, that looks a lot of different ways. I don't know that I'd be able to do this work if like, I didn't believe that if I didn't believe that like we can overcome any obstacle.
Thank you so much, Erin. I've taken so many notes over here. I really appreciate your time. I know you said you could stay till 5:45, and I'm just very grateful.
I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be in community with you all. I'm so grateful to be building and learning from you. And it's going to be dope. It is
Yes.
dope.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, be
Thanks,
well.
Erin.
Okay. So Mark is not here, but we're going to talk to Roger. Oh, there's Mark. Let's let him get connected. Mark, you're right on time. Hi.
Hey, Mark.
Muted.
You're muted. So you're right on time. We just finished up and I was gonna move on. So you're on mute, Mark.
Sorry, I was in the car until now, but thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. So do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, I'm Mark Levin with the Texas Public Policy Foundation and Right on Crime. And actually, I've been working with TCJC since 2005, very long time.
I'm so glad that you're here. So we just talked to Erin about the Clean Slate initiative and about how we can build an effective campaign. And the reason I wanted to ask you some questions is because we have people across Texas who have conservative constituencies. And so I wanted to gain some knowledge about what strategies do you recommend we should try in our conservative constituencies?
Oh, sure. Well, there's a lot of discussion about reopening the economy and people returning to work. And so this really dovetails very closely with that. Obviously, that needs to be done safely, but also equitably. I mean, the people that have been hurt the most by the pandemic are people in some of the most vulnerable communities, and obviously some portion of folks who have a criminal record and as a result have really experienced poverty. In fact, there was a study by the Center for American Progress, 20% of all long-term poverty is caused by criminal records. So this is an opportunity to kind of reopen in a more equitable way through expanding workforce participation, and it also benefits employers. Even with the elevated unemployment rate that was caused by the pandemic, Texas is still a tighter labor market than other states, but more importantly, certain areas, whether it's welding or other plumbing, various skilled trades, there's still shortages of people to do a lot of these jobs. So I think it'll benefit businesses and workers and families.
Yes. So how do you think that we can get support from conservative judges and DAs and local leadership in those counties?
Well, I think that part of it is discussing how this affects a lot of people. And I was talking to Chairman James White of the House Corrections Committee a few weeks ago, and he was saying how people in his district, constituents who are very conservative individuals, told him how frustrated they were because of obstacles they've encountered with their criminal record. And not all of them may be addressed through Clean Slate. There were some people who were having problems in terms of their Second Amendment rights, and that actually requires even going further and giving people commutations. But I think that, but there is this sense in which once we look at the data, we see that a pretty significant share, about 60 million Americans, adults, have a criminal record, and they're in every community, rural, urban. So I think it can hit home everywhere. And, also I think it's important to emphasize the people we're talking about have already been held accountable, which is supposed to be the purpose of the justice system, not perpetual punishment. And, from a biblical perspective, there's the Jubilee, right? So for many Texans who are of a strong faith, this ought to resonate there as well.
Yes, I love that. So, do we have any questions from Facebook right now? Okay. Roderick, do you have anything you want to ask Mark?
He just hit home with me. That Jubilee sounds really good. You know, after 7 years, you know, and you haven't had any type of contact with law enforcement, and you're not on parole anymore. Why shouldn't you have all your rights and privileges restored? You know, that's total forgiveness. That's what we're talking about. It's new wings in the primary sense, right there.
Jennifer?
Well, I think those were two powerful points, especially about, you know, as we're trying to kickstart the economy, this is super important to our conservative base, but also, you know, in other areas that I advocate, I always touch on rural areas and their culture and the things that are important to them. And a huge part of that is faith. So I think it just completely makes sense. And I'm so glad that you reminded us of that that's something that we could add into our messaging, definitely.
Alexa?
No, I concur. It's all linked. Everything's linked together, from New Wings to the Second Chance Act, the federal one, through like all of us are connected, and they're like a Venn diagram. They overlap. It's not just housing, it's employment. It's not employment, it's family. It's not family, it's religion. It's not religion, it's politics. It's not so
Yeah.
we all, you know, it's a chain link effect. One goes to the other, goes to the other. So I think if we should start working on kind of mending that and fixing it and reforming it and making it better, then we can have like a ripple effect into other areas that are affected by this. I was just denied 2 days ago housing because of my criminal record, which was 23 years ago. And they said, absolutely not. And I was like, can we talk about it? And they're like, what's the point? There's 15 more people that want the house. So like, and that was, yeah. This was just that was 2 days ago. And it was very hurtful for me. I was very disappointed in that, but it's still affecting me even today. When is enough enough? You know,
I'm
so.
really sorry to hear that. It's just terrible. I can only imagine how you feel. And I'm kind of thinking, you know, to me, it just violates the dignity of every person. You know, in Texas, the only thing we brand should be cattle, not people. We're giving people a scarlet letter, and then we're not erasing it for all
Right.
this time. And we have all this research.
I told my partner, I said, I feel like I should be apologizing to you, but I've said I'm sorry long enough, you know? And it was a slap in the face. And it was, I've experienced it with employment. That's why I'm self-employed. But this was new to me with the housing one. And I was really taken aback because I did not think that it was going to affect it. It was so long ago, you know, here's the money and the credit and everything you need. And they're like, nope, because I said, oh, okay, well, you know, so after, you know, it knocked me for a minute, and then I was like, okay, moving on, I will have to figure something out. And, you know, we are resourceful, you know, necessity is a mother of, you know, so yeah.
And you know, I was saying there's research. If it's 5 years since you were last had a conviction and you've been in the community, you're no more likely than anyone else to commit an offense. And even after 2 or 3 years, it really is very little difference. And so there's absolutely no rational basis for continuing to hold this over someone.
Right. Like I said, it was 23 years ago and stuff, and we face it all the time. And it's like, it's just me, but what if you had children? What if, you know, there was a dire situation? You know, Jennifer worked 2 minimum wage jobs trying to wear a monitor. You know, how hard was that one? How are you going to get your license if you can't get a job? How can you get a job if you don't have a place to live? It's all interconnected and stuff. So we're all there, been there and done that. So, you know, we will overcome.
Mark, we really thank you for dropping in.
Oh, well, the pleasure is mine. I hope to spend more time next time at just a number of conflicting events, but thank you for the great work y'all are doing.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
You have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so we all know about criminal records, and we're going to talk to Roderick real quick, because Roderick is like the poster child for Clean Slate Initiative. He has been the biggest champion since I met him last session. So my first question for you is, Roderick, how has your record affected you?
My record and this first part, I figured out a way around it, but my record kept me from being able to live in a neighborhood that I can afford to live in. You know, when I first came home, I was trying to find an apartment, and because of your criminal background, you know, they won't allow you to live in any neighborhood. You know, the second chance laws allow apartments to be opened up, but all of those apartments that opened up were in high crime rate neighborhoods. So it was like you putting me back in the same environment that I come out of. And I've made up my mind to do the right thing, and I have children that I am subjecting to this type of environment. So I can't do that. And so I had to find a way around it, but everybody won't have that way. You know, I was just fortunate enough to be on disability before I went in prison, and I didn't know that I was still on disability. And when they finally caught up with me after I had prostate cancer surgery, I was able to obtain enough funds to go and purchase a home, you know. And even with that, you know, here the lady was talking about the housing issue. There's certain neighborhoods, I don't care if you got money and good credit, you still got a background, because that's what they do now. They check your background, and so it's certain neighborhoods that would protest just to keep you out because of your background, you know. And then the other thing was being able to work in the professional environment, you know, with being able to obtain certain certifications and licensing, and that door was just completely closed. It was just completely closed. No professions. They finally got a few things, the plumbing and a few other things, barber licenses. They found things, but I mean, those are still jobs. I mean, what if I want to go and work in the bank? I can't do it.
So,
I
Roger,
can't
we have
do
a
it.
lot of people watching that may not know you. So,
Oh, know what I was charged with?
yes, and how long ago?
Okay. I was charged with 2 aggravated assaults with a deadly weapon and aggravated robbery with the deadly weapon. And I spent 8 years of a 10-year sentence in prison.
What was the deadly weapon?
The deadly weapon was a box cutter. My story was I was going into a Target store to steal 2 VCRs. And this is the tricky part. A security guard confronted me when I got outside the store, and 2 citizens decided they was going to do a citizen's arrest. Because the security guard was a senior citizen, that made not only the charge go from theft to robbery, but aggravated because he was a senior citizen. And so with the assault charges came, the guys were trying to stop me from getting in my car. I didn't put my hands on anybody. I was trying to pull away from them to get in my car to leave, and they saw a box cutter in my back pocket. And they tried to give me 25. And I couldn't afford an attorney, so I stayed in jail until they came down to something that I could do. And I did 8 years on a 10-year sentence for that. I got out of prison in 2010. I started a nonprofit organization while in prison that actually worked with prisoners, and I still do that today. And I got off of paper in 2012. And this is 2020, finna be 21, and my criminal background is still held over my head. I have not even had as much as a speeding ticket since I've been home. And they have turned a lot of the power over to the communities and to the business owners to basically dictate who that they will take in and how they operate. And it's like I got a life sentence because after I paid my debt to society and have proven that I've been rehabilitated, I'm still held hostage. And that's not fair. It's just not fair.
So
And
Roger,
so-
how
ahead.
would something like the new wings benefit?
I'm glad you said that. New wings would first of all, we know we have to get the Clean Slate Act. It has to go through. They have to get people to back that up, and then like I was glad that the young lady was talking about the state went after they convinced the people that it was needed, that they were able to add the felons to it. But how it would benefit me is the most important thing is I can have my total citizenship and all my rights as a person that never have committed a crime restored because I've demonstrated that I have been rehabilitated. What I do now is when I go into different places advocating or talking to public speakers or something, I don't tell them about my background. I talk to them on the level that they're on, and then when I'm asked to give my testimony and I tell my testimony, I get a lot of jaw dropping. They're like, man, I never would have known that just by looking at you. That's true. That's true. And that's a testament to those who have came out and have changed their lives and are doing the right thing. So why shouldn't I have my citizenship and my citizen rights restored? I'm totally rehabilitated.
Thank you, Roderick, for sharing your story with us. Alexa or Jennifer, would you like to add anything before I have our call to action?
No, I think
We're good.
everybody that we've had this evening has pretty much said what we're all feeling, and we're just ready to put some
Let's do
action
it.
behind it. Let's do it. Let's get it done.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like I was thinking earlier about we all want freedom from our past so we can have the freedom to create a future, right?
Amen. Amen.
And the way we can do that is by building a coalition, building a team. And we need leaders in the local level. So if you are interested in helping with the Clean Slate initiative and the new wings, please go to the Statewide Leadership Council webpage that Jen is going to put somewhere. And then, so we have to enable the resources that we do have, whatever we have on our body right now. With, you know, the people in Montgomery, Alabama, all they had were their feet when they protested, but they used their feet to get out and go. So we have resources, each of us do. And so if you want to get involved, join us at our meetings. Statewide Leadership Council, we meet every other Tuesday. We're a coalition that's trying to turn communities into constituencies where we all stand together all across Texas, and we want to invest in leaders to help push this agenda. So please get involved. Like Aaron said, we have support. We just need the team. So I really appreciate everybody who joined us tonight. Are there any last words?
We're good. Let's do it.
All right, go team. Create power.
Amen. Amen.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.